them out and see which one you can take out and still keep. God cannot have all of those omnis at one time and be a coherently defined being. Anybody else?
You mentioned that you've been in some debates, and I'm wondering how you approach the topic of miracles, Christian accounts of miracles, and stories like that.
Yeah, miracles. Actually, miracles don't come up that often in public debates. I think it's because most Christians realize how embarrassing it is to do that. Once in a while, if I'm debating a local minister, they will bring up some miracle. And in fact, it came up in this talk about the saint, the canonization of Mary MacKillop in Australia. In order to be canonized, you have to have at least 2 miracles that are authenticated. And guess who does the authenticating? The Catholic Church. They have their scientists and they authenticate. One was a woman who prayed to her. Now understand, Mary MacKillop died in 1909. She's been dead for a century. She's a dead woman. But somebody in the 1960s prayed to her, and their lung cancer disappeared, and she lived into her 90s. And so the Catholic Church said that is an authentic miracle. She prayed to Mary MacKillop. And how many Protestants think that was an authentic miracle, right? Even if you do believe in miracles. How many Protestants think you can pray to a dead saint and have a miracle happen? But in any event, the host of the show asked me, well, aren't there a lot of extraordinary things in life? And I said, well, yeah, but extraordinary doesn't equal miracle. So, in definitions, the only way you could possibly know that a miracle happened, unless it happened right to you right now, the only way you can know it is through history. You have a report, you have a story from somebody. That's all you've got is history. We don't have a videotape of Jesus coming out of the tomb. Wouldn't that be something? I mean, if we could authenticate it, you know? We don't have videotapes of these so-called miracles. In fact, if miracles really happened, then by now somebody should have won the Nobel Prize for pointing that out. The existence of a hitherto unknown force in the cosmos. Look, here it is. Let's prove it. Let's do it. Any scientist in the world would love to prove a miracle. Wouldn't that be amazing? All we have are reports of miracles, stories of miracles. And the historical method, we know, is the weakest of all sciences. Some people don't even think history is a science, but I'm going to be generous and say history is a science. The methodology of history is very, very limited. History, for starters, in order to be done at all, before history can even get off the ground, you have to assume natural regularity across time. You have to assume that the laws of nature worked back then the same way they work now. If somebody says that plays of Shakespeare just magically appeared on the table in front of them, well, we know that's not how people write, right? Maybe they did. Maybe the plays of Shakespeare did just magically appear. Maybe they did. We weren't there. You can't disprove it. But you can't know it through history. You need some other tool. History is the wrong tool to examine any of these things. It'd be like using a microscope to search for a planet. It's the wrong tool. But history is all they've got. They have stories. Thomas Paine even pointed out, you know, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. What is more likely, and David Hume and others talk about this, what is more likely? That history would go out of its normal course, or that somebody exaggerated or misinterpreted, or lied, or did fraud, or confused a dream for reality, or in the case of the woman who was supposedly cured by Mary MacKillop of the lung cancer, one of the stories had the doctor coming in saying, this looks like the x-rays were mixed up. Because couldn't believe how the former x-ray had the cancer and the new one didn't have any cancer. A miracle. But wait a minute, if x-rays can be so easily mixed up, isn't that possibility much more likely than the possibility that somehow this woman prayed to a dead saint who'd been dead for 60-some years? And how does that work? Here's this Mary MacKillop up in heaven, floating around as a ghost, and then thousands of people are praying to her, right? So twice in a century, she decides, oh, okay, you can be healed. And okay, you can't. I mean, that makes her a moral monster. I mean, it's not that. So yeah, I can tell you stories in my life that are amazing, that look like miracles. I did faith healing on people that, whoa, how do you explain that? But Gary had lost his voice, and when I prayed, he regained his voice. And I saw a miracle. But it's interesting, you never see any discarded prosthetic devices. You never see any discarded glass eyeballs, right? You only see the easy things, you know. What's that webpage, God Hates Amputees? Because why not? Why couldn't? Well, is God limited to only these kind of soft things that maybe could be interpreted one way or the other? Is that how powerful God is? When I used to work with Catherine Coleman, I thought I was seeing miracles. She would put her hand on the person's stomach and say, "Praise God, the cancer is totally gone." We saw a miracle. We didn't know that person went home and died. We didn't know that. People would throw their medicine on the stage, thinking they were healed. That's dangerous. I mean, that's horrible. So I would say the atheist doesn't rule out miracles. The atheist just says you got to find something other than history to prove it. Maybe the miracle happened. Maybe nature did go out of its course. Maybe some violation happened. But if you want me to accept it as true, it's going to have to be more likely that that happened than these other likely things that we already do know happen. We do know that people make up stories and exaggerate and misinterpret and make mistakes. We do know those things happen. And if you want me to believe that it really did happen, then you're going to have to overcome the prior likelihood. What's the Bayesian word for that? The prior probability of these other things adding together. And you know what happens in other religions. How many Protestants think that the Virgin of Guadalupe is healing somebody of a corn, you know? How many, I mean, obviously, we see it in other religions. We see this immense tendency the human race has, this susceptibility to jump to supernatural conclusions for any crazy idea. What makes Bible-believing Christians exempt from that? What made the writers of the New Testament exempt from that in their stories? Weren't they just human beings, and don't human beings make mistakes? So a skeptic will think about terms in those ways. This is not an a priori dismissal of miracles. We're open to it. If they happen, I would love to know that. That would be amazing. If there's a God, wow, I'd like to know. I'd have a million questions. First of all, I would say, God, I forgive you. But then after that, I would ask a million. I mean, we atheists don't have our heads stuck in the sand like, I don't want to believe because that puts too many moral restrictions on my life. I want to be free to sin. You know, that's the image you get. We would like to know if the miracles happen. That would be something amazing to know. But so far, we don't have anything but stories. And stories don't cut it for me, and I think for a lot of you here.
I have a question. One of the things that I find most fascinating about religion is the paradox between religion's relationship with morality, and how on one hand religion has motivated some of those destructive, violent acts in all of history, but it's also motivated some of the most kind, loving, and generous acts. And so, you know, I've had a hard time deciding would the world be a better place without religion. And I wondered what your thoughts were on that. And real quick, one thing that kind of ties in is you had said, you know, as far as purpose goes, as long as there's problems, there's purpose. But the key there is that involves work. And I think the fact of the matter is that a lot of people are lazy. So just whatever comments you have on that, I'd be interested in.
Yeah, and my chapter on morality in the new book is called Mere Morality. Just like C.S. Lewis wrote Mere Christianity. Mere morality is the basic street level, passing grade morality. And that makes anybody a moral person. We can go beyond that. And we're all a bell curve of personalities, right? Some people over here are sociopaths and psychopaths, and we lock them up. Some of you are over here just that side of it. Some people in this audience, when you see cruelty to animals, you'll break out in tears. You'll break out into a rage. But others of you are over here, and it doesn't bother you. Don't raise your hands. We don't need to know. In fact, there's a few people, there's probably one or two even in this room, who might even enjoy seeing animals hurt. I mean, but we all fall across this kind of spectrum of altruism, empathy. And you know some people are just naturally more empathetic than others. We call them the saints or whatever. And atheists are that way too. Beatrice Webb in England, who worked as an atheist, she was rich, but she dressed like a poor person, went into the working class. She helped to fight poverty. She helped to start education. If she were a Catholic, they would have made a saint out of her, right? She started the healthcare system in England. She cared. She really cared. So I think just naturally, if there were no religion, a bunch of people are going to fall over here, and they're going to be the empathetic types, and a bunch are going to fall over here. That's why we build prisons, right? They're just going to, we're just going to have to accept that we're not all the same, and try to encourage through education.